The flickering neon lights of the music industry often cast long, distorted shadows, obscuring the grim realities that unfold far away from the screaming crowds and the multi-platinum plaques. For decades, the world of hip-hop has been captivated by the raw energy, the distinct, gravelly delivery, and the meteoric rise of artists who defined the sonic landscape of the late 90s and early 2000s. We watch these figures ascend to the pinnacle of global fame, tracking their chart-topping success, their Grammy nominations, and the massive cultural influence they wield over generations of listeners. Yet, behind the carefully curated personas and the infectious beats lies a complex, often dark tapestry of human existence, marked by monumental collapses, legal downfalls, and the quiet, devastating unraveling of familial bonds. It is a stark reminder that the glittering surface of celebrity can instantly shatter, leaving behind a wake of destruction that affects not just the headline makers, but the people closest to them who are forced to carry the heavy burden of a tarnished legacy. To truly understand the gravity of these modern tragedies, one must look beyond the stage lights and examine the profound personal reckonings taking place in the coldest corners of the justice system, where fame holds no currency and the echoes of past mistakes grow deafeningly loud. If you want to stay informed on the deep, untold stories behind the headlines and follow the complex human journeys that shape our world, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications for our upcoming investigative reports. The story we are exploring today is not merely a chronicle of legal proceedings or a standard recap of a celebrity downfall, but rather a deeply atmospheric exploration of consequence, estrangement, and the desperate search for peace amidst absolute ruin. At the center of this narrative is a veteran musical artist, a man whose voice once dominated the airwaves with unforgettable anthems that got audiences moving across the globe, but who now finds himself confined within the stark, unyielding walls of a Louisiana correctional facility. The transition from performing in front of tens of thousands of adoring fans to sitting in a silent cell is a psychological and physical chasm that few can truly comprehend. It represents a total erasure of autonomy, a sudden and permanent halt to a high-flying lifestyle, and the beginning of a prolonged period of isolation where the only companion is one's own reflection. For this 55-year-old rapper, known to millions by his stage moniker, but known to the legal system as a man facing severe accountability, the clock has slowed down to an agonizing crawl. The vibrant energy of the American South, particularly the rich musical heritage of Louisiana, which heavily influenced his artistic identity, now feels like a distant, unreachable memory, replaced by the rigid routines and stark realities of long-term incarceration. As the heavy iron doors locked into place, signaling the start of a massive two-decade chapter of confinement, a separate, perhaps even more painful conflict began to brew outside the prison gates. It is the invisible, aching divide that opens up within a family when a public figure is convicted of a deeply troubling crime, forcing their children to navigate a complex labyrinth of public shame, personal confusion, and emotional self-defense. In this specific case, the veteran artist's son, Million Tyler, finds himself standing at a profound emotional crossroads, caught between the natural, biological bond to his father and the horrifying reality of the actions that led to his father's lengthy removal from society. The public often forgets that when a prominent figure falls from grace, their family members are thrust into an agonizing spotlight they never asked for, forced to answer for sins they did not commit. The young man has had to endure the heavy weight of his family name being dragged through the mud, associated no longer with musical triumph, but with brutal allegations and legal maneuvers. The relationship between the incarcerated father and his son has reached a state of profound strain, a silent standoff marked by unanswered calls, unfulfilled wishes, and a deep, protective wall constructed by a son who simply isn't ready to face the man behind the music. Behind this, legal representatives attempt to bridge this massive emotional gap, acting as messengers between a concrete cell and a world that is rapidly moving on. Renowned attorney Roy Maughan, who has taken on the monumental task of representing the aging rapper, has recently shed light on these desperate, unsuccessful attempts at communication. According to the legal team, the musician has felt a powerful, urgent desire to reach out to his son, to somehow patch up the shattered remnants of their relationship, and to find a sliver of familial connection before the long years of his sentence truly begin to blend together. Yet, these overtures have been met with a wall of silence, a clear indication that the emotional wounds inflicted by the events of recent years run far deeper than any prison wall. The lawyer's candid admissions paint a poignant picture of a father looking out from behind glass, hoping against hope for a sign of forgiveness or at least a willingness to talk. while recognizing that the healing process for his son cannot be rushed, managed, or dictated by legal strategies. It is a slow, painful reality check for a man who used to get whatever he wanted with the snap of his fingers or the delivery of a hit record, now forced to realize that some things, once broken, cannot be easily fixed. This unfolding family drama is set against the backdrop of a legal battle that shocked the hip-hop community and forced a harsh re-evaluation of an artist who had already walked a remarkably turbulent path. The conviction that triggered this current era of isolation stems from a deeply disturbing incident that occurred in the year 2022, an event that set off a chain reaction through the legal system and ultimately culminated in a crushing 20-year sentence. For a man in his mid-50s, a 20-year sentence is not just a period of punishment, it is effectively a defining final act, a massive chunk of his remaining life that will be spent under the strict supervision of the state. The details of the case, which we will dissect with rigorous care as our report progresses, paint a picture of a chaotic, dangerous lifestyle that finally caught up with its protagonist in the most permanent way possible. The legal maneuvering required to navigate these charges was immense, involving strategic pleas and a desperate effort to avoid an even more catastrophic outcome that would have ensured the artist never saw the outside world again, as we stand on the threshold of this narrative. Looking at the fractured pieces of a once booming career and a deeply divided family, the atmosphere is heavy with unresolved tension and quiet contemplation. The rapper's team insists that he has accepted his fate with a sense of profound resignation, hoping that by quietly serving his time, he can somehow provide a sense of peace to the people affected by his actions and his turbulent lifestyle. But peace is a rare commodity in a story marked by such severe allegations, and the road to any form of redemption or reconciliation appears longer and more treacherous than ever before. The son remains guarded, the father remains confined, and the public remains transfixed by the spectacular collapse of an icon. In the next phase of our report, we will dive deep into the specific legal mechanisms, the high-stakes courtroom drama, and the chilling past precedents that turned this 2022 case into an absolute legal minefield, revealing exactly how a hip-hop pioneer found himself facing the ultimate erasure of his freedom. To fully grasp the intense gravity of the situation that has unfolded within the Louisiana judicial system, one must dissect the intricate and incredibly high-stakes legal maneuvering that took place behind closed doors and inside the sterile environment of the courtroom. The veteran rap artist, Michael Lawrence Tyler, known professionally to millions as Mystical, found himself entangled in a legal web that grew increasingly suffocating with every passing month following his initial arrest in the summer of 2022. The primary charges levied against the 55-year-old musician were of the most severe nature, centering around a brutal sexual assault allegation that immediately put his entire future, his liberty, and his enduring legacy on the line. When the state prosecutors brought forth the formal indictment, the sheer weight of the allegations threatened to trigger a catastrophic legal mechanism that could have easily resulted in a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For an aging icon who had already spent a significant portion of his adult life navigating the correction system, the prospect of a first-degree rape conviction was a definitive death knell, an absolute guarantee that he would spend his remaining days behind bars. Recognizing the immense danger of the situation, Mystical and his seasoned legal team, spearheaded by attorney Roy Maughan, had to engage in a highly calculated, stressful process of assessment, looking for any possible avenue to mitigate the impending disaster. This strategic positioning eventually led to a dramatic turning point this past March, when the Grammy-nominated artist entered a formal guilty plea to a significantly reduced charge of third-degree rape. This specific decision was not made lightly, nor was it a simple admission of guilt in the traditional sense. Instead, as his attorney later detailed to media outlets, it was executed as a strategic best interest plea, a legal maneuver often referred to in American jurisprudence as an Alford plea, wherein the defendant maintains their factual innocence regarding specific aspects of the crime, but acknowledges that the prosecution possesses sufficient evidence to likely secure a conviction at trial. By opting for this calculated path, Mystical effectively neutralized the terrifying risk of a first-degree rape conviction and the mandatory life sentence that came attached to it, locking in a finite 20-year term instead. The necessity of accepting such a hefty sentence becomes blindingly clear when examining the deeply problematic history that the musician carried with him into the Ascension Parish courthouse. In the eyes of the law, a defendant's past is a living, breathing entity that dictates the parameters of their present treatment, and Mystical's prior record was an absolute minefield. Decades earlier, at the absolute peak of his commercial success in 2003, the rapper had been embroiled in a massive scandal that resulted in a conviction for sexual battery, a serious offense that required him to serve a substantial 6-year prison sentence and register as a sex offender. This foundational stain on his record was further compounded over the years by separate legal infractions, including a conviction for drug possession. Under Louisiana's strict habitual offender statutes, these previous marks meant that prosecutors had the leverage to label him a multiple offender. This specific designation strips away judicial leniency, drastically amplifies potential sentencing minimums, and creates severe, almost insurmountable obstacles for any defense team attempting to argue for probation or a minimized term of years. These compounding external factors created a situation where going to trial before a jury was viewed as an unacceptable gamble. Despite the fact that Mystical continuously maintained an underlying insistence that the encounters leading to his 2022 arrest were entirely consensual, the legal reality, however, is often entirely separate from a defendant's personal narrative. Attorney Roy Maughan candidly admitted that certain elements of the state's case would have been practically impossible to contest or overcome in open court. Specifically, following the initial harrowing accusations made by the victim, law enforcement officials acted with immense speed, securing a comprehensive search warrant to gather physical and forensic evidence from the rapper's residence. This warrant yielded materials and documentation that severely complicated the defense's position, particularly regarding additional drug-related charges that were tied directly to the night of the incident. Facing a mountain of forensic evidence, a highly motivated prosecution team, and the looming threat of the Habitual Offender Act, the defense was forced to acknowledge that a negotiated plea was the only logical mechanism to preserve any semblance of a future for the artist. Adding another layer of practical calculation to the final resolution was the timeline of his captivity. Mystical had been held without bail at the Ascension Parish Jail in Lemonville, Louisiana, ever since his initial arrest in 2022. For roughly 2 years, the rapper existed in a state of legal limbo, confined to a local facility while the wheels of justice ground slowly onward. Under the structural rules of the state's correctional system, this extensive period of pretrial detention is not simply forgotten. It applies directly as time served toward his ultimate 20-year sentence. This specific factor provided a minor sliver of relief to the defense team, as it meant that a portion of the massive debt to society had already been paid during the agonizing wait for a final court date. According to Maughan, the musician has processed these heavy terms with a remarkable degree of sobriety and realism. Accepting the finality of the 20-year mark and adapting to his current circumstances as well as anyone possibly could under the crushing weight of such a permanent reality. Yet, while the legal architecture of the case was being finalized in the official records, the emotional courtroom drama reached a fever pitch during the formal sentencing hearing on June 16th, exposing the raw, bleeding fractures that this entire saga has left behind. In a moments-long flash of panic or desperation, the veteran rapper actually attempted to stand before the judge and take back his previously submitted guilty plea. He addressed the court with an argument that he simply had not possessed a sufficient, unhurried opportunity to fully weigh the long-term consequences and the sweeping legal ramifications of the agreement he was signing. It was a stark, humanizing glimpse into the sheer terror of a man watching his freedom officially evaporate on paper. This sudden about-face, however, was met with a fierce, uncompromising wall of resistance from his accuser, who took the stand to deliver a devastating impact statement. She described the sheer brutality of the 2022 attack in vivid, heartbreaking detail, directly asking the court to hold nothing back and to enforce the absolute maximum penalty possible under the plea agreement, highlighting the permanent psychological scars she will bear forever. The tension in the room was suffocating as the words of the victim echoed off the walls, forcing a direct confrontation between the perpetrator and the human cost of his actions. In a striking, highly dramatic response that stunned those in attendance, Mystical looked toward the woman and stated openly that if he had truly inflicted that level of trauma and committed those specific acts against her, then he fully deserved the maximum sentence the state could hand down. This complex, highly emotionally charged exchange perfectly encapsulates the profound tragedy of the entire case, leaving the courtroom heavy with a sense of grim finality as the 20-year term was officially cemented into law. With the legal battle now effectively drawn to a close, the focus shifts entirely to the quiet, long-term aftermath of the destruction. where an aging musical pioneer must begin the slow process of serving his time, while his estranged son watches from a safe distance, trying to determine if the father he once knew can ever truly be separated from the convict who now occupies a cell in Lemonville. The finality of a 20-year sentence brings a quiet, heavy stillness that contrasts sharply with the chaotic energy of the music world that Michael Lawrence Tyler once commanded. To fully understand why this tragedy resonates so deeply across the cultural landscape, one must look at the spectacular trajectory of Mr. Call's career and the profound lessons it leaves behind regarding the fragile nature of success and the unyielding accountability of the law. Rising out of the vibrant, highly competitive musical ecosystem of New Orleans, Louisiana, Tyler possessed a vocal delivery that was entirely unique, a fierce, roaring, almost drill sergeant-like bark that injected an undeniable surge of adrenaline into every track he touched. In the late 90s, when the Southern hip-hop movement was fighting for mainstream respect and global dominance, his explosive presence became a foundational pillar of that historic transition. His breakthrough came under the legendary No Limit Records banner, a powerhouse independent label that revolutionized the music industry through sheer volume, distinct aesthetics, and an uncompromising work ethic. Tyler was a crown jewel in that empire, selling millions of copies and delivering anthems that became permanently etched into the fabric of urban nightlife and pop culture. His creative peak arrived at the turn of the millennium, transitioning into a highly successful solo career that yielded massive, chart-topping hits like Shake Ya Ass and Danger, Been So Long. These tracks were not just fleeting radio hits. They were massive cultural moments that earned him multiple Grammy nominations, critical acclaim, and a reputation as one of the most dynamic live performers in the entire industry. His music crossed over into the mainstream, securing his place on global festival stages and late-night television shows, capturing an audience that transcended traditional genre boundaries. Yet, looking back at that golden era through the lens of his current 20-year incarceration, the lyrical themes of chaos, danger, and reckless living take on a far more sobering, prophetic tone. The very traits that made his artistic persona so captivating, the unhinged energy, the boundary-pushing aggression, the wild unpredictability, seemed to bleed into his personal life, creating a volatile cocktail that would ultimately sabotage his monumental achievements and lead to a historic, multi-decade downfall. The true tragedy of this story lies in the recurring nature of his legal troubles, illustrating a pattern of self-destruction that has haunted him for nearly a quarter of a century. When he was first convicted of sexual battery and extortion in 2003, resulting in a 6-year prison sentence at the absolute zenith of his commercial viability, it was viewed by the industry as a shocking, catastrophic interruption to a brilliant career. At that time, there was still a widespread belief that a period of incarceration could serve as an ultimate turning point, a harsh wake-up call that would allow an extraordinarily talented individual to rehabilitate, refocus, and reclaim their position at the top of the entertainment world. Upon his release in 2010, the music community watched closely as he attempted a slow, cautious comeback, performing for nostalgic crowds and collaborating with a new generation of artists who still revered his classic catalog. For a brief moment, it appeared that he might successfully navigate the treacherous path of redemption, balancing the heavy baggage of his past with a newfound appreciation for his freedom and his enduring creative gifts. However, the harrowing events of 2022 shattered that narrative completely, exposing the reality that the underlying issues plaguing his life had never truly been resolved. The brutal nature of the sexual assault allegations brought forth by his accuser in Ascension Parish shocked even his most loyal, long-term supporters, forcing a collective realization that some patterns of behavior run too deep for fame or fortune to correct. This second major conviction has effectively erased the possibility of a permanent musical legacy, replacing his artistic contributions with a grim status as a repeat offender within the correctional system. For the broader public, his story stands as a stark, cautionary tale about the illusion of celebrity immunity, demonstrating that no matter how many millions of records an individual sells, or how deeply embedded they are in the cultural zeitgeist, the wheels of justice will eventually grind forward to demand a full, uncompromising accounting for actions that inflict severe harm on others. Amidst this grand narrative of structural collapse and institutional confinement, the most poignant, deeply human element remains the quiet, ongoing estrangement between the aging rapper and his son, Million Tyler. The young man represents a new generation forced to inherit the emotional debris of a father's destructive choices, navigating a complex reality where love and self-preservation are locked in a continuous, agonizing conflict. Speaking out about the situation with immense maturity and emotional clarity, Millian has made it clear that while the biological and historical connection to his father can never be truly severed, the boundaries he has put in place are absolutely necessary for his own mental well-being and peace of mind. He has candidly acknowledged the profound anger, disappointment, and sorrow that accompanied the news of his father's 2022 arrest and subsequent 20-year conviction, recognizing that the healing process cannot be dictated by his father's schedule or the desperate desires of an incarcerated parent looking for a quick emotional fix. Millian's public statements outline a slow, deliberate approach to eventual reconciliation, emphasizing that a face-to-face conversation will likely occur at some distant point in the future, though he cannot and will not attach a specific timeline to that monumental step. For a son, watching a father transition from a globally celebrated musical icon to an aging inmate in a state penitentiary is a profound form of grief, a mourning of what could have been, and an acceptance of a reality marked by heavy iron bars and heavily restricted communication. Millian has openly expressed a sincere hope that his father will utilize the massive 20-year stretch of confinement to seek the deep psychological and emotional help that he clearly needs. Moving past the superficial defenses of the legal system and truly confronting the internal demons that drove him to destroy his own life and inflict immense pain on his victims. It is a powerful stance of tough love, a declaration that a meaningful relationship cannot be built on a foundation of unexamined mistakes and toxic patterns. As the final chapters of this comprehensive report draw to a close, Michael Lawrence Tyler remains inside the Ascension Parish Jail, watching the world move forward at a blistering pace while his own existence is reduced to the rigid, unyielding parameters of a cell block. The multi-platinum plaques, the screaming stadium crowds, the glitz and glamour of the music industry have all evaporated, replaced by the stark, undeniable reality of a 20-year sentence that will occupy the remainder of his meaningful adult life. The legal battles are finished, the strategic pleas have been recorded, and the voice that once shook the foundations of Southern hip-hop is now muffled by the thick concrete walls of a Louisiana correctional facility. The story of Mystical is a profound tragedy in 3 acts, a rapid, historic ascent to the pinnacle of cultural influence, a turbulent middle chapter marked by recurring warnings and systemic failures, and a definitive, heartbreaking conclusion defined by isolation, familial estrangement, and the absolute finality of the law. Ultimately, the music will continue to play on classic playlists, but the man who created it serves as a permanent, sobering reminder that the choices we make in the dark will always, inevitably, come to light.